If you read any books about astrology or are a dabbler, eventually you'll run across the saying rule of three. And that's something that astrologers use to basically say, like, if you see an indicator of something one time in a chart, that happens. Two times, maybe that's gonna mean something significant in your life. But by the time you get to three, you're like, oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. And following Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance, and I'm a fan of the guy generally, I realize that he's a pretty perfect example of the rule of three. So let's talk about Kendrick Lamar for a little bit. Here are some examples. All right, so you look at the chart, right? Kendrick Lamar is a Gemini. That's the first thing that I would notice, because rappers tend to be air signs, air sun signs, or they have a lot of planets in air. Kendrick Lamar is no exception. He's a Gemini. What's his rising sign? Libra, air sign. Where's Venus, the ruler of Libra and therefore his chart ruler? Gemini. Mercury is very important to Geminis. Where's Mercury? Well, it's in Cancer. That's a head scratcher, right? So Cancer Mercuries are not known for being as quick as Gemini Mercuries, and that, no offense intended, that's just kind of a known fact. What's conjunct Mercury? Mars, which for some reason is like on this line just the way that it's set up, but you can see that the real line of where Mars is right next to Mercury here. And this dealie here with the X is called the part of fortune, which is a point that's determined by, I forget what exactly, but where the part of fortune falls, you can, depending on who you ask, some astrologers use it, some don't. I do. You can have a little bit of extra oomph in that area. So Mercury, part of fortune, Mars. Regardless of what sign, people with Mars-Mercury conjunctions tend to talk fast and move fast and drive fast. Emphasis on the drive fast. I know a lot of people who with Mercury-Mars who get speeding tickets. I'm just saying. Okay. All right, so we've covered air, and then the typical thinking with Mars. So that's made faster and better. And then we look at the third house and what's at the very beginning of the third house, because remember, we read charts counterclockwise. So this is the line on the third house, and this is the beginning of the third house. Uranus. Uranus is also extremely speedy. And when you see people who have Uranus like right here, they often think very differently from how everybody else thinks, a lot faster, and sometimes it's actually hard for the mouth to catch up with what the brain is doing. So there can be like some concerns about how like as a younger child, it can be like, why are they having problems talking or like stumbling over their words? Not everybody, just some. But it can sometimes be because the brain is moving so fast that the mouth is like trying its best, but like there's a lot of input. So these are all different indicators of mentalization, okay? But then just continuing on, so this Gemini sun is being opposed by this Uranus. So then that's just like the ego here, and reconciling the ego, and then the need to think differently, because you can be opposed by third house people who have very different, like radically different viewpoints from you, or people in your early environment who have radically different viewpoints from you, or like to be the smartest person in the room, or can be fanatical in their beliefs. And Geminis, God bless them, most Geminis are not necessarily fanatical in a viewpoint. They will change their viewpoints. the setup with the Uranus opposition is a little bit different, but then Chiron also adds a little bit different to the equation, because the Sun Chiron conjunction can really sensitize you to, in this case, because it's in Gemini related things. So use of your words to help or harm, or just being really sensitive to the impact of what you say, and like sometimes having to be the one to say the thing that nobody else wants to say, but it's like, I'm saying it, take it or leave it. Okay. So far, these are things about words, language, and saying stuff, but I have said more than 3 things, right? So that would make for, in his case, and this is my opinion of him, a genius. Okay? So let's now take a step back for a second and just look at the condition of his chart ruler, because he's Libra rising, and like I already said, Venus is the ruler of Libra, and it's here in the 8th house. So what does it mean to have your chart ruler in the 8th house? Regardless of who the ruler or what the ruler is. So the 8th house can be a variety of things. When you Google it, it can make it sound a little bit like a soap opera, but generally with 8th house stuff and people, it's that you see what's under everything. So what's going on underneath, beneath the surface, what people really mean when they say certain things, like what people's motivations are versus what they're doing. And then the Gemini part is needing to talk about it and needing to say it out loud. And depending on the condition of the thing in the 8th house, people might be able to receive that information or they might not. This is another chart point that I use, the vertex, which there's not a lot of information about the vertex. There's a few things that you can Google, but the vertex is the quote-unquote axis of fate. And so this ascendant descendant is an axis, but this vertex, and again, it's a mathematically calculated point, and I don't remember exactly how it's calculated, but I use it. I trust my software and I use it because it works. It's just something to keep in mind. This is an axis, so that means that opposite 5 Gemini is 5 Sagittarius. That's the other half of the axis. This is the anti-vertex. So it's a fated point, and if you have something conjunct the vertex or square the vertex in your birth chart, I don't know about the softer aspects. I don't use those, and by that I mean sextiles and trines. But the conjunction definitely plays. So if you had something conjunct or opposing with the vertex, a thing conjunct it means that it definitely plays out in life, like you can't avoid it. So having your chart ruler conjunct the vertex is something of a feeling of like fated life, or like, and I think that it would be a pretty deep feeling of like, I need to do this and this, or I need to do this specific thing, or like I would hope that it would confer a sense of purpose, because if not, you're always encountering these Venusian people, which in my opinion, encountering Venusian people all the time would be fine. I would welcome it. Because there are other setups that you can have that it's like, no thank you. I would like to not encounter that ever or ever again, and yet I have to all the time. Please stop. But who's Venus in Gemini? It's like young people, beautiful people, and it's people on the younger side who can be flaky. No offense, Geminis, but if you know, you know. Or they can change their minds a lot. So it would be like encountering that, right? So you go out into the world and you find these young people who, you know, say one thing one day and one thing the next day. But having your chart ruler here, again, the need to use these Venusian gifts for something would be how I would hope that it would manifest. But just like figuring out and reconcile the meeting of these people and the need to say stuff that you're seeing, or the need to relate to people that relate to people usually in a nice way, but in a way of like saying like, I'm sorry, I need to be real with you. Because it's in the 8th house. Like in 8th house, people can't pretend that stuff isn't happening when it's very obviously happening. As polite as a Libra rising would want to be, this and then the other thing that I'm about to say would make it impossible to pretend that stuff's not happening. Okay? I'll stop. I need to stop rambling about the vertex. So, like many in his generation who are Libra rising, Kendrick Lamar has Pluto in the 1st house. And so a 1st house Pluto is somebody who, again, it's like, I can't not say the thing, or him showing up in a place. Like when you are a 1st house Pluto, people react to you and your presence and the way that you comport yourself. You just stick out like a sore thumb, whether you want to or not. And so you can have a lot of hangups about the way that you are perceived or received when you arrive in a place. So this is also playing into the 8th house chart ruler situation. So we're kind of at 2, but I would count this vertex conjunction as maybe 3 for the intensity. But so but now we're going to get to the third part. So the Pluto is in conjunct the Venus. So they're in aspect to each other. So that's another thing of like the seeing things for how they really are and being perceived or received as threatening, or at least sticking out in the way that you conduct yourself or comport yourself or appear to other people. 1st house stuff you just can't get around. You are that whether you want to be or not. So I think that people with 1st house Plutos probably don't want to be perceived as intense every day. Like sometimes you would like to take some time off from being perceived as intense, but it's not going to happen because it's a 1st house thing. You carry it for life. Okay, what have we here? This is Neptune in the 3rd house, and it's sextile this Pluto, and that sextile means that means that a yod is formed to this Venus. Oh, yods, one of my favorite things to talk about. So that it's an inconjunct to Venus. So best use of a 3rd house Neptune is perceiving things differently and artistically. It's artistic and creative, and sometimes just a little bit flaky about the details of daily life. Like these are people who get lost in Walmart, or you lose them in Walmart rather. But it's forming a yod to Venus. So this is an incredible amount of pressure on this Venus in the 8th house from a 1st house Pluto and a 3rd house Neptune. So that this would be just another element of pressure on Venus here, which is artistic. Like this in the 3rd house is artistic. This Venus here is artistic. A Chiron Sun conjunction can also be artistic. A Pisces moon in the 5th house, which we haven't even gotten to, the need to express yourself, like the emotional need to express yourself, that's artistic too. South Node in the 12th house in Libra, that's artistic, but it doesn't necessarily need to do anything about it. It can just like be happy in the 12th house and create stuff. But this is a chart where the chart ruler is on the vertex and it has a tremendous amount of pressure, and Venus is also about creating art. So it's a really cool chart, and I can keep going forever, but I won't. I love doing this stuff. But I just wanted to show you that you can see the same thing again and again and again, but you can also see it playing out in pop culture. And I've probably watched the Super Bowl performance like probably more than 25 times at this point. I just have it on ambiently. Like, this is a very talented and creative, artistic, driven individual, and the chart shows it in so many different ways. So I hope you enjoyed this. This is just an example of very similar things playing out again and again. And of course, this is confirmation bias, because like obviously he's a very famous person for doing the stuff that I'm talking about right now. But the whole thing about astrology is like, it's like a chicken and egg thing of like which came first. But we're looking at the energy, and I'm talking about what the energy is actually doing. And I honestly sometimes don't care about the chicken egg thing. It's just really interesting to see how the energy is actually playing out. So hope you enjoyed this. See you next time.